Howdy, folks. Happy Tuesday. Happy New Year's Eve. We're back. We did not have a show yesterday. Russ was traveling down to deep in the heart of Texas for the Winter Classic. I was just too damn busy. so we didn't have a show today. We'll have a show today. We didn't have a show yesterday. We will not do a show on Wednesday from New Year's Day or Thursday because Russ and Ack are traveling back from their work/vacations. We should have a show on Friday. Okay, let's start pre-show stuff. I just wanted to start with this because I know it would tap into the interest of both of our panelists here. Is that I was really taken aback when I saw the little video snippet of maybe 20 seconds of Adam Gase. Now I know Adam Gase has some sort of problem when it comes up talking with the media. I mean, he's got his beard. He had the hat pulled down so low that you could barely see his beady eyes. But the question was asked about Le'Veon Bell, and it's been firmly established he was not on board with signing Le'Veon Bell to the contract, but he was signed. I think up until a certain point, he had played pretty well for the Jets. You know, when the team was not playing well, when Darnold was out with his mono, I thought Bell played pretty decently. But Gase comes out and said, you know, he's got 3 more years in his contract and talked to the GM. It's like it was very like, I don't really want to talk about this guy, and almost I got the feeling I don't want this guy on my team, but it's not my decision type of thing.
So it's interesting. So Joe Caparoso, who does a pretty good job on Turn on the Jets, put out a tweet yesterday, and I wrote about this and kind of covered a lot of what Gase has said over the last couple of weeks regarding Bell. And if you go back in history over the last probably 2 weeks, you know, he's had some meetings with Bell. Spoken about trying to get the offense back to where they were at Pittsburgh, using him smarter, figuring out how the offense. So on the one hand, you can believe the argument afterwards that he was just tired of hearing the question as responding in kind. On the other hand, and this is kind of my view, is you may not want the guy back, and I can understand that. He wasn't your number one choice. You thought you have overpaid him. I don't think you particularly used him particularly well this year. But all you had to say was, yeah, you know what? He did a good job for us. He was, if you look at it, he was great, as you mentioned, Mike, early in the season when they struggled, right? He said all the right things. He very easily could have gone off and basically said, look, this is falling apart, but he did a good job of not fracturing the locker room. But there's a way to say, you know, as opposed to saying, hey, speak to the GM, which basically is a backhanded slap across the guy saying, I really don't want him here, is I've answered this question before. Yes, I want him here, but I'll refer all personnel questions to the GM, Joe Douglas. That's a whole different way of saying it. I'm not the GM, speak to Joe Douglas. So Gase has not ever been particularly good in press conferences, and Russ can probably test that at his Miami days. He never was good. And he clearly in New York, where if you're not good, you're going to get vilified and raked over the coals. And he rightfully so yesterday, because in my opinion, he handled the situation extremely poorly.
Russ?
Well, I mean, the first thing I'll give Gase credit for is at least they finished out the season strong. And like Jan said, they could have gone off the rails. Apparently, Gase doesn't like the guy who asked the question. So that sort of started it down that path. Whoever that reporter was.
Was it Manish?
I don't think it was.
Oh, there's more stuff about Manish Mehta if you saw yesterday.
I know. There's like a burner account.
A burner account, yep. Wyatt V18. There's supposedly a burner account.
So, but Manish Mehta aside, because he's just a troll, I have no time for him. He, just to put it in fair terms, you can't read his coverage and be serious. Anyhow, moving on to Gase, though, I think he still needs media training. I said that before he was hired. I said that the day he had the summer press conference, and apparently the Jets don't want to spend the money to have somebody talk to him for a half hour and practice how to work in front of the media. That's all he'd have to do. He doesn't want to do that, or they don't want to do that. Somebody doesn't want to do that. So you're going to have these press conferences where he just has no idea how to handle it and look very uncomfortable doing it. That's fine. End of the day, it doesn't even matter whether he wants Le'Veon Bell or not. He is stuck with them. Like he said, he's got a 3-year deal. Joe Douglas is not very versed with the cap. I don't know if anybody's very versed with the cap there anymore. So they're not going to be able to just magically get rid of him. Besides, he did play well, and he played well in his last game, and he played well in half of the season. I just think it's there's always something to pull out of the Jets. Even if there's a positive, people want to pull out the negative. And I think that's all they were doing yesterday.
So Mike, I mean, you guys, I'm not sure if you know, I do a podcast pretty much every week about the Jets. That's on the Orlads Football Network, right? So the guy we talked about a lot, he has a different view on the media than I do. His is a bit less cynical than I am. And, you know, Manish has always been one of those who likes to stir up the pot. I mean, that's kind of just his style of writing for the Daily News. And what I will say, look, they finished 6-2 offensively. They were not very good at all. They were more inept than anything else. The guy who deserves a lot of the credit is Greg Williams, and for the work he did with their defense to kind of get them, despite losing 18 guys this year overall on that team.
I know Williams did a great job.
They didn't fracture. I know, Mike, you have experience with the Bills with Williams, so I saw the little grimace in face there, so I understand why.
I just know that his favorite paper towel is Bounty.
Yes, but look. Bell, what in my opinion, was not used well. They also didn't help that their offensive line was a revolving door, and they had 11 different starting units on the offensive line this year. So, as you said, Russ, there are positives to how the Jets finished. There are positives based upon what you look for in the future, especially a lot of the guys that were found waiver wire or late round draft picks that panned out. But the backdrop of everything that goes on with Gase and with Bell kind of detracts from all of that. And as you said, Russ, if Gase doesn't want to have that training, if it's on him, guess what? I'm your GM. I'm the owner. You're going
Joe
to that
Douglas,
training.
you don't understand. Joe Douglas isn't even a real GM. He's a personnel guy. He's not a real football GM.
But you had the guy Nissim who was in there who did the cap stuff years ago. You can find guys who are cap experts to work with the GM, right? I'd rather, in my opinion, have a guy who's a personnel expert as my GM and bring in a capologist than the reverse. We saw what happened with Idzik and other guys, and you saw what happened, how poorly the team was run.
Hold on. If you'd rather have a personnel guy as your GM, how many good trades did he make this year?
Not a ton.
The Leonard,
you can't argue the offensive lineman, a good trade in my opinion.
The Leonard Williams deal was a good deal.
The Leonard Williams deal was a good trade also, especially the Giants now are hamstrung. They're going to have to either sign him, which I think they will, although he'll hark on the fact that he got a sack in the last game, and that's the reason why he should be signed. His advanced stats don't measure how good. Sound familiar in terms of the industry we're in these days?
Yeah, but I think Joe Douglas so far has been fleeting, and his record with the Eagles the last couple of years was lousy. So I'm not ready to anoint him. And the last thing about Manish Mehta, when you're a member of the media, you shouldn't be like actively cheering for one coach and trying to assassinate another. He's very much like Dick Young that way. So I guess, that's why.
We saw what happened with Dick Young and Tom Seaver because that worked out well for our organization.
Yeah, I was going to say you have to factor in Le'Veon Bell was playing against the second team backup.
He didn't have a good game Sunday. He carries for 44 yards. He made a couple of nice plays on reception.
It's his combined yardage. Hold on. It's his combined yardage. The guy's also blocking. He is a good receiver. If you look at what he did the last 6 weeks, it's good. It's not fantastic, but their line stinks.
Yeah, I agree. And just to move on quickly, and then we'll get to hockey here. It's like expectedly Freddie Kitchens was fired in Cleveland, and
probably shouldn't have worn that shirt.
Now, I heard
Black Monday. Although Jason Garrett is now twisting in the wind, you should. I'm sure the cases on there covering it like crazy.
His entire staff was fired, but he wasn't fired. Is that?
I don't. I go. Okay, the fact that
his entire staff.
Wait, I don't know if you saw it, but they have pictures of him on the field with his family after the game. If that's not an indication that a guy expects to be fired, nothing will be.
Yes.
Well, I'll give Ed Werner credit, who seems to own this area for ESPN, and he basically said Garrett's just kind of like cleaning out his desk, going through all the final things that a coach would do before he leaves, and he's just living up to his obligation of that to Jerry, probably just to make sure Jerry gives him something cushy down the line with the Cowboys and a lesser role. So I think it'll be announced today.
Yeah, and Ron Rivera was hired as the
a 5-year deal with Allen also being completely out of the organization, which is probably
Allen needs to be out. But here's the weird thing: is this guy going to live off his dad and now go back to the Rams, and they're going to hire him because his last name is Allen?
Well,
that's pathetic.
No, although the Rams didn't have a particularly good year this year, so who the heck knows what's going to happen there? God, in my opinion, regress this year.
It'll be interesting to see if there's somebody in place that the Redskins are going to put in charge in terms of player personnel, or to replace Allen, or if they'll bring in a new GM. I'm not sure.
If Bill Parcells had a son, would you hire him? This is what I mean, that's what it seems like with this situation.
Bill Belichick's
well, we can make the argument that McVay got a little bit of a shot also because of the fact of what his last name is.
Right.
Kyle Shanahan. All right.
Don't talk about my Niners. He's done a good job. Although I still believe, as I wrote, if you guys watched the first game, he mismanaged that first game against Seattle. Take the tie, and they wouldn't even have to play for anything on Sunday. But that was
don't talk about the Jets and the Niners. You got to be a fan of one or the other.
I believe Green, and trust me, Russ. I had season tickets for the Jets. Trust me, I've had more than enough years of pain.
Hello, Hockey World. Today is Tuesday, December 31st, 2019.
I'm Jan Levine.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Lagello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com, the last Hockey Buzzcast of the decade. If I have to hear one more thing, last of the decade, I'm going to pull out what's left of my friggin' hair.
Well, we weren't here to start the decade, so whatever.
Well, we're here at the start of the Buzzcast, so so anyway. Okay, we have to start with this based on his long tenure with the Rangers and the vociferous nature of his post-game comments. But Torts reached a new level a couple nights ago. And honestly, I think he was justified in his vitriol of the NHL and their officiating. If you didn't catch it, apparently in overtime between Columbus and Chicago, I believe, there was a call that took off a couple seconds.
Like 1.2 seconds.
1.2 seconds, right, in overtime. Columbus scores a half second after the clock expires. So they don't get the overtime winner. They go to a shootout. Korpisalo gets hurt in the shootout, now out week to week with a knee injury. And Tortorella in the postgame essentially said, this league that is so hyped up on getting everything right and everything, exact, and they overlook this, and I've lost it, and stormed out and said, "I'm not taking your GD questions," and left. He's going to get suspended. We know that, but I mean, honestly, I sort of agree. You never know what is going to happen in these games, and a second here or there can mean something, Jan. So I don't hold him any kind of disrepute for his comments. Actually, I'm supportive of them. Well,
I mean, look, Alabama lost because the second was added back to the clock a couple of years ago. It wasn't on a field goal as time expired. You had a goal now. I mean, I think
72 Olympics. Russia stole that one from the U.S.
Yep. Yes, 1972. Well, that's because time kept being added back to the clock over and over and over again. So
ask Doug Jones about that one.
You have that. You also have the home slow finger at home, so you make sure the clock doesn't run as well. But his ire is likely more so driven because of the fact that Korpisalo got hurt by the sheer nature of them having to go to the shootout, right? So Tortorella has never changed his stripes, right? He has always been a guy who's going to call it as he sees it and doesn't care about sugarcoating it or what the league's reaction is going to be, right? And positive or negatively, he draws interest. I don't love the way he runs his press conferences, although he and Larry Brooks had some clear doozies over the years, as Russ and I saw when he was in New York. But given the circumstances and situation of what caused his blow up, it's kind of hard to argue that he's wrong in what he said. You could say maybe he should have handled it better, but that's not his personality, and that's not the type of individual that he is. And as you said, I don't have one issue of what he said because he was 100% right. And if they're going to suspend him for it, my opinion is going to be more fine than suspension. I can't wait to see what his reaction is if he gets suspended.
Well, yeah, I don't think he'll get suspended. I think he'll just get a big fine. The issue is, I get it with the time and the overtime and the winning goal. As far as the injury goes, again, when an athlete has a lot of wear and tear on their knees, I'll just use me as an example for playing sports over the years. I walked away from doing the dishes one day and didn't trip, fall, or anything, and blew out my knee. Like, there's just a point sometimes when your knee is going to blow out, and it doesn't matter when it is, how it is. It just happened to happen this moment. If it didn't happen then, it could have happened in warm-ups. It could have happened at practice. You know what I mean? So I can't blame the situation on the Korpisalo injury, but I can blame it on a win, that a game that didn't need to go to the shootout. And so that's bad. I think this is incredibly weird, though, that he now has 2 goalies that were injured in shootouts, and Lundqvist just happened to finish it in 2010, but his knee was completely injured in that. And that's a time where Torts probably should have played harder in overtime and not played for the shootout, knowing that his goalie was injured. This time he didn't know. So it's just weird. Torts is always involved in weird situations.
Yeah, apparently, according to the chat, I didn't see the comment, but Colin Campbell released a statement that was, I guess, not really
typical Colin Campbell statement.
Yeah, I mean, and I wish we wouldn't have to hear those statements anymore, because really they're sort of counterproductive most of the time. It's like, I mean,
yeah, they're just going to say we looked at it, we were right.
Yeah, they said that his comments were unwarranted and took Torts to task for it. But maybe Mr. Campbell and the NHL should turn their focus on the Department of Player Safety and figure out how that could work.
Far be it for me to protect Torts in this, but the situation is, he saw it. He was right. He's really been a lot better the last couple of years as far as blowouts, and points are so tight this year
you lost a point, and you lost the regulation overtime win,
right?
Because of it when it comes to playoffs.
That was a breaking point of frustration. I saw him very frustrated in Philly, maybe like 3 weeks ago, and he wasn't near as hot then as he was now, but he was getting closer. So this season's definitely taken a toll on him, and I could see it because I was in front of him. And that's a hard thing to do because he can only work with the guys he has.
Yeah.
It's a tough deal for Torts.
And now he has to rely solely on Elvis as his number one. And
yeah,
I mean, that's a killer. I mean, that team is, I mean, they're on the outskirts of playoff competition. Yeah. At best, and they have, let's see, 42 points. The wild card's 48, and third place in the Metro is 51. So they have an outside chance to compete for a wild card down the stretch. And now that you lose your number one goaltender, you're toast.
I'll give you one thing though that's been a bright spot for them and could help them offensively. Alexander Texier has been really good.
Yeah,
I mean, he really good to the point where if he has another hot month, he could start getting in the Calder talk. I think he has like 13 points in 30-something games, but he's been looking really good. And, guys from France, there haven't been that many players from France. And he's had a meteoric rise. Like, he's still only 20 years old.
Yeah.
And it is kind of amazing what he's done. So you never know. Him, Benstrom, those guys get hot. Maybe Torts can keep the numbers down, but it's looking really tough for him.
Well, I think you also remember they were very high on Elvis coming into the season. Maybe the struggles earlier in the season.
I think that was high.
He turns it around and plays like the goalie they thought they were getting when the year started.
Yeah, I agree with Russ. I think it was cover because they lost. Mm-hmm. They lost Bobrovsky. This is the young guy who could potentially be our savior.
Korpisalo was not good early, but very good the last month or so.
Right, and I think he's shown over the last few years that he had the capability of being a number one. All right, just moving on here, Ross. I know you were at a disadvantage because you were traveling yesterday, so you didn't get a chance to see some of the World Junior stuff. I watched the U.S. game against the Czechs. If somebody's, I couldn't pass it up. The Czech fans, when they score a goal, start jumping up and down.
I know, it's crazy. It's like festive.
So what I did was I recorded it off my TV and played Chris Cross's Jump, and it went it was perfect, Ross. It was just that they were doing it. But anyway, no, as the game itself. The U.S., I mean, obviously the Czechs at home are going to play a lot better than they're a good team, a good junior team, but they're not one of the top 3 or 4 in the world. But they gave the U.S. a challenge. They tied at 3-3. They went to overtime, and again, I know this. You've talked about this guy a lot. For those who passed on Cole Caulfield, what you saw yesterday with that game-winning goal, you should shake your head and say, "Damn," because.
And he hadn't done much the whole tournament yet.
No,
so it's been starting to heat up. That's a big thing for them.
Yeah, it's been Zegras, it's been Kaliev, it's been
amazing.
Zegras has been absolutely ridiculous in this tournament. Eyes in the back of his head on some of these passes.
Yeah,
was it 17 goals, 9 primary assists? I think it was.
Yeah, I exchanged messages with Murray Pam, who I used to work with at Sporting News, and he's like, the Ottawa Senators are overjoyed at Shane Pinto and how he looks right now.
Well, on my all-decade rookie draft, I put Shane Pinto in there because I liked him in the draft. They picked him like 32nd, and he's starting to blossom, and that's a heck of a pick for them. I mean, Shane Pinto has been all that, but this team finally seems to have a little bit of handle, a little bit on the penalty kill. It's still not great. If they can get more secondary scoring, they'll be good. It's funny. You can't get too carried away with game to game in the World Juniors till you hit the medal round or just miss the medal round because there's so many ups and downs. It's a short window. There's players that are tired, they're injured, and that's why, like a Czech team, yeah, they could definitely play with some momentum. If you walk out with a win, you walk out with a win. Like just look at Russia. I wrote about them the other day. They beat Canada 6-0. They lose to the U.S. They switch goalies already. You would think, wow, they're really in trouble, but they're really not in trouble.
Yeah,
because it's a tournament,
Well, I don't know. I don't know how they do it, but the division setup,
the groupings,
the groupings are horrible. I mean, honestly,
the group of death.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, the Czechs, the Germans, the Russians, U.S., Canada.
It's based on points and finish last year, and this whole thing. I know, and look, the Finns have it easy,
and the Swedes.
And now I think the Swedes are better than the Finns.
They are.
The Finns piled up some points early, and that really helped them by playing some lousy teams. But that's the nature of the tournament.
Russ, two guys I want to get your opinion on. In my opinion, I've seen a bit more bite out of Wallstrom than I expected to. I like the fact that he's been a lot more physical, which has been, I think, a criticism of the past.
Yes.
And B, in my opinion, Russ, the guy who I think has not looked particularly great this tournament is K'Andre Miller. I don't think Miller's had a good tournament at all, having watched just a couple of the games so far.
Yeah, Wallstrom first. He started off a little slow, but I think his last 2-3 games have been really good. I didn't see yesterday's game. I'll see it when I get home. But I do like what Wallstrom has been able to do. I agree. He's been coming on lately. I think it was just he realized where he fit in on the team because he has to be the leader.
Mm-hmm.
Offensively, he's got to be a force. And I think he's starting to do that a little bit. Not enough, but a little more.
He went to the net a couple times yesterday.
Yep.
He's doing that a lot more.
Yeah, and that's a big thing. He needs to do that because he's got great hands. Miller, you got to remember when you've got all that responsibility and facing all the best, he hasn't looked great. It's true. He's had some bad turnovers, the blind pass to Lafreniere, all of that. But he wasn't the only one that did that. Another U.S. defenseman did that too 2 games ago, and they just passed the puck right to another defenseman in the center of the ice. So that's a coaching thing. Sandelin's really got to get through to these guys like, hey, you've got to use the sides and the corners. You can't go up the middle against these guys. But in the end, he is skating well. He is passing well. He just, he's had some turnovers. But when you play a top spot like that, it's going to happen. I don't think he's been horrible, and I don't think he's been great. But I think the skating's good and the vision's been good. And I think those are the things you should drag out of it.
Did you see the game winner last night, the goal?
No, not yet.
Okay, so definitely watch it. I mean, what was interesting is first of all, he had 3 Wisconsin guys on the ice at the same time, right? Caulfield and Turcotte, right? And you can clearly see the chemistry between Turcotte and Caulfield in terms of just the movement that they had on the ice. But then Caulfield on the game winner, his recognition of the situation that he had a forward who was tired against him. Right. And pretty much it was the typical basketball give and go, right? You dish and you dart right away. And that's what he did. But the more impressive part to me, beyond just the recognition of the situation, was the release, right? The puck was on his stick for maybe a millisecond before he blasted a top shelf for the game. He's got the more impressive part to me.
It was a give and go one-timer. That's basically what it was. It was unbelievable.
He's got a great release. There's no question. And I did just see it. And it doesn't stay on his stick for more than a few seconds. That's just the way Cole Caulfield is.
Now, just to touch on Team Canada, after that loss to Russia, now they've switched goalies. They went away from Nico Dawes. Alexis Lafreniere, which I've been told that's the correct pronunciation. So I was corrected by somebody who speaks French in Toronto. Because I was saying Lafreniere, and it's Lafreniere.
Okay.
Yeah, so, okay. But I seriously doubt he's playing the rest of this tournament. They may use him as a stalking horse or use him as a distraction. He might be coming back. He's not coming back. He's the number 1 pick in the draft. He's got too much to risk if he comes back. It would be stupid for him.
I think he comes back if they're playing for a gold medal game and they don't see much on his MRI, but it seems like they're just testing him every.
I think it would do a tremendous disservice if you let him play. Yeah.
I mean, he's more hurt than Jack Hughes was last year, Russ.
Oh yeah, no, there's no question. But I told you, it was very odd to me that he was basically not talked about for having an ankle injury coming in, and that was why he didn't play in the prelims. He wasn't even practicing, and nobody really talked about it. They were just like, "Oh yeah, Lafreniere's here. He's, he had an injury." They didn't even mention the injury, and then when this injury happened, it's like, "Whoa, look at that! Now he's hurt." And it's like, well, he was already probably playing, still banged up. Just because he was playing doesn't mean that other injury didn't have any lasting effect. It's just that he's a tough kid and wants to play through it all. Now he's got 2 injuries. I never was able to get confirmation whether it was the same leg, but it could have been, and that could be the other issue. Is if it is, they're not messing with that probably for weeks until he plays again.
Right. And right now, I believe after yesterday, Canada has number 1 in that group locked up, and I think the U.S.
They have to win.
They have to win. Okay, they're playing the Czechs.
Right. If they win, they have the number 1 locked up.
Right, but the U.S. at least will be number 2.
Yeah, but that's bad news. If Canada gets the number 1, that's bad news. I will say this on the Caulfield goal too. It is interesting how he could score it from different sides of the ice because, I've seen him do it from the right side probably more, but he did it from the left side that night. And that's a sign of a great goal scorer is that he doesn't have to be in that one spot, one Alex Ovechkin-y kind of spot. He can move around, and that's a big deal. But no, this Canada seeding is everything. If they get the top seed, it's going to hurt the U.S.
Well, if right now the U.S. would play the Swiss, I believe, because right now Finland, Sweden are at the top of the other group. I think it's the Swiss, and then it's Slovakia. So it's the difference between playing the Swiss and Slovakia if you're 1 or 2.
The Swiss, they tend to play a good defensive game and very physical, and that's one where. If they keep the score down, you're going to be sweating it out as a U.S. fan. That's the problem with that.
Whereas Canada will run roughshod over Slovakia.
Oh yeah, it won't even be a game.
There was only 1 game yesterday, but they're just notable in terms of an event in that victory for Pittsburgh over Ottawa. It was the injury to Jake Gensel, and he went really hard into the boards after scoring a goal, came off the ice. Now I haven't heard any kind of report, but I don't know what it is with the Penguins this year. Every time they're getting close to being fully healthy, somebody else big gets hurt. Because Crosby, I think he's not back yet, but I think he's close.
He's skated individually. He supposed he was going to start practicing with the team this week, is the last I saw.
Right, but Gensel, I mean, he came off the ice looking like he was holding his right shoulder.
Yeah, he slid in. That's the way he slid into the boards.
Yeah, and it was either a shoulder or maybe a collarbone, but it didn't look like it was something that he's going to bounce back from in a game or 2. I mean, it's a miracle, Russ, that Pittsburgh has maintained their positioning. A lot of credit goes to Tristan Jarry, who's played great this year for them, and
Brian Rust and a few others that got hot at the right time. Gensel was one of them too. Nobody's talking about it, so I think they're going to keep it low and not say much heading into the new year here. I think they're just going to call them day to day. That's what I think they're going to do.
Now, I just wanted to touch on this thing because there was a report on the weekend, and I know that I mentioned it to you, and I'm going to write about it a little bit today, Russ, in terms of the Leafs situation with they may be shopping a guy like Jeremy Bracco. And Bracco has not asked for a trade, but he did come out a couple weeks ago and said, he saw all these guys being called up and thinks he's ready for the NHL. And I think you and I both think he's ready for the NHL. He's a premier passer. There are other aspects of his game that I think need to still be improved, but there are players in the NHL who you could say that about right now. But what I'm struck at, and I just made a quick list here, besides Bracco, Puljujärvi, who we know stayed in Finland, same with Honka, Josh Hosang, who asked to be traded by the Islanders and wasn't, Elias Anderson with the Rangers, and maybe you put Bracco in that category. What do they all have in common? They all asked to be traded, and they're all still on the same teams.
Yeah, because now, I mean, look, teams own their rights. Now they all want to get some sort of assets before they relinquish those rights. And so the players are really powerless. In Bracco's situation, I mean, he is really getting victimized by his great play and by the previous coach, because I do think they would have at least tried him out otherwise if Babcock weren't in there. But now they have gotten to the point, and this is what I worried about, and I told you like 2 years ago, Mike, that this was the worry, that all of a sudden Bracco would just sort of never get called up and eventually get traded and do well somewhere else. And now it looks like it could be happening. And
I think they recognize his value. They've had inquiries. I know that when the Muzzin deal happened last January, that one of the players that they didn't want Grundstrom, they wanted Bracco. Bracco was leading. I think he was second or third in the AHL in scoring at that point. They didn't want to give up Bracco. They ended up giving up Grundstrom, who's I think going to be a pretty good pro.
Right. You guys, one quick update. Sorry to interrupt. So the Blue Jackets just released info that Korpisalo had surgery to repair a torn meniscus in his knee, and he'll be sidelined 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, you have to believe that was probably going to happen at some point soon, anyhow. Honestly,
but still, I mean, I don't blame.
No, I don't blame him.
So if it happens in the first period of the next game, okay, it happens. But it happened in a shootout that shouldn't have happened. But going back to what we're talking about. I think at this point, the Leafs recognize that Bracco is an NHLer who, because they have on the right side Kapanen, Marner, Nylander, and one of Spezza or a number of other guys who can play the right side on the fourth line, that there's not a spot for Bracco, but they want to get the value that Bracco is worth. That's not like somebody was saying, well, they need a backup goaltender. Maybe they can trade him for Georgiev. Georgiev is right now a de facto number one for the Rangers. He's playing number one ice time or number one game starts, and he's a restricted free agent after this year. So whoever gets him, if he isn't on the Rangers next year, is probably going to have to pay him in the neighborhood of $2 million as a sort of 1A, 1B type of goaltender. So,
but I think Bracco's better than 3 or 4 guys on the Leafs. And if you're telling me that you can't turn Spezza and have him play a different side, I would disagree. Now, Nylander, I get it. Spezza, you can. There's no question.
No. But I think what they're saying, Russ, is that he's not a fourth liner. I think he's a top 9 guy, and I don't think they're thinking he's going to bloom at being a second power play guy and a guy who plays 9 minutes a night playing with Freddie Gauthier. I mean, that's not.
Well, but not everybody's a fourth liner. I mean, I think I think long term he's better than Timashov, Moore, Engvall. Those are 3 guys.
I don't think Engvall, but I think you could say more. I mean, Engvall is a different type of, he's a 6'5".
He's a different type of player, but at the end of the day, he's going to score a lot more points than Engvall.
Yeah, he'll be a better offensive player. But
so, to me, it's like the Leafs never made the decision to do that, and even the new coach hasn't made the decision to do that. And so now they're going with veterans and size, and Bracco's sort of getting sized out of it.
Well, the ironic thing here, Jan, is that if the Leafs decide to trade one of Janssen or Kapanen before the deadline because they're making over $3 million and they need to go out and get a backup goaltender, then all of a sudden Bracco has a chance to come up and play in their top 9 because one of those guys his spot would be cleared and the salary would be cleared, and then they would need somebody, maybe a guy like Moore could fit in or Engvall, but I think that would give Bracco an opportunity. But it just doesn't seem. It seems right now they don't want to do that move during the season when the value wouldn't be at the highest in terms of getting a return, and it's easier for them to trade Bracco if they can get a prospect in another position that is at the same point in his career that has the same value as Bracco. And that's tough because I think Bracco's value is high.
Well, I mean, I think part of it also is Toronto still needs some help on the blue line, right? So they could try to parlay Bracco into either an expiring contract with money being retained in order to get them under the cap, right? Or maybe even a quote unquote longer term asset of a player that's signed for a couple of years at a decent price, but one that the other team will be willing to eat some of the salary to move him, and that kind of facilitates the move of getting Bracco elsewhere, but allows Toronto to maximize his value while also filling holes that they know they need to get filled, right? I mean, you've talked a lot about backup goalie. Georgiev has been mentioned a lot. I don't think Georgiev is going anywhere right now, to be honest with you. And B, I think the Rangers would want more than Bracco, probably for Georgiev, given the difficulty of finding a goalie. And Toronto's going to look for a guy who's going to be cheap in the future as opposed to one who's a restricted free agent, maybe making money, possibly in arbitration. So Toronto has a bunch of different ways, but to me, I think they're going to target blue line first, or move another asset to free up space to fit Bracco in. But I think it's more than likely that Bracco ends up getting moved, and they fill a need by moving him in that kind of a deal.
I think it's more likely because Bracco will be used in a deal in place of a draft pick because they've already traded their first round pick in the Marleau deal, and they don't want to give up any more high picks. So why not give up a guy who's, I think, ready to step in? And a lot of teams would value that rather than a future second round pick that you don't know what you're going to get. That being said, I also think if they're going to trade for a backup goaltender, they don't want to be tied down. Like, that's what I'm saying. Not to say, I think Georgiev is a really good goaltender, but he's going to make money next year. He's an RFA, and he's going to make money based on what he did this year. I think the Leafs would be more apt to go after somebody like Ryan Miller, who's a UFA or a UFA goaltender who can fill the gap for a year. And then there's a goaltender in the KHL they're going to go after, that I think they'd probably be successful at. They'd rather go down that road because in terms of salary, that Russian goaltender would cost $925,000, and that's going to be a factor. So
I'll tell you two things. One disturbing thing is on Google, if you look up Toronto Maple Leafs roster, you get all of their active players, and then the next guy on the list is David Clarkson. I don't know why he pops up
because he's on the roster. Because
I know.
Yeah, and somebody tweeted out, of course, in the decade, the Canadian teams that had series victories, and every Canadian franchise, even the pitiful Edmonton Oilers, had at least one series victory in the decade, and the only one that didn't was the Toronto Maple Leafs. Okay, now
no, hold on. Getting past the shame of that, and we should bask in the glow of that for a moment. Anyhow, but no, the other thing is, I think Jan may be right, but I think the Rangers and Gorton are making a big mistake if they don't move Georgiev by the All-Star game, by the trade deadline in February, because if not, then they're going to have to trade him at the draft. If you don't trade this guy, there's no way Shesterkin's staying in North America. He's going to go back to Russia, and he is not going to play another year in Hartford. And I think that's what they're going to be tasked with. And I am not ready for me to say Georgiev is a possible number one where I know Shesterkin is.
A lot. I've written about it. Others have written about it. You're in a situation where, to a certain extent, you're in a catbird seat because you have depending if you have Lundqvist, right? You have an older goalie who still can get the job done, who has shown he can still be a number one, and he can be elite, especially given the porous defense in front of them. You have a young goalie in the minors who has shown that, and again, he's not 21, right? He's 24, almost 25 now.
Right.
He's not that young anymore, but he could be your goalie of the future. And you have Georgiev, where you've seen pockets of dominant play, and you've seen the weaknesses that can get exposed with excessive play based upon his performance in some of the games to date. He's been inconsistent at best, but he also has shown that he probably could go somewhere and maybe be a number one goalie, depending on the location where he goes to, right? So if you're not going to get a sufficient offer at the deadline and guys are going to view him as a backup where Toronto would do so, you almost would be better waiting to the offseason, moving him then where you have a bigger pile of teams that might be interested in acquiring him to be the number one rather than dealing him to a contender as a backup at the deadline.
Yeah, there are going to be enough teams.
I'll give you a possible downside. Here's a possible downside to that. So they wait for that. We hear in the offseason, maybe the cap doesn't go up that much, and now teams cool on Georgiev because they don't want to pay him because now the salary is undetermined. That could hurt him.
But he's an RFA where you still have retention of rights, even if you sign him to a short-term bridge deal, right? You look at if you're going to use the Grubauer deal as a baseline, 3 years, $10 million, that's not an excessive overpay for somebody like Georgiev.
Well, it is if you're guessing that he's going to be a number one. And
$3.3 million a year is not an excessive overpay, in my opinion, for a guy who you think could be your number one.
Okay, I'll go back to hold on. I'm going to go back to the Rick DiPietro thinking.
You can't use that contract as anything.
No. Time out.
Don't even know what I'm going to say.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, fine. We're waiting with bated breath, so go ahead.
Here's the issue with that. Everybody kept saying, well, it's not that much money. It's like $4.5 million. I said, it's a lot of money if that's your backup. And a lot of teams can't afford a $3 million backup for 3 years. That's the problem.
Right. If the contract model for Georgiev is Carter Hutton or Grubauer, which is 2.75 to 3.3, fine. If it's Antti Ranta or Darcy Kemper, which is over 4, and I know Kemper,
then you're screwed.
Well, no, Kemper's played like a number one, like a clear number one. I don't think there's any argument about that. And Ranta got hurt because he got injured. He was playing like a number one.
But he only played as a number one in the second half of last year, Jan, and he got a 2-year extension.
And the first half of this year until he got hurt.
Yeah, but he signed the contract before that happened. He signed
a contract on the basis that he could be a number one.
Right, but he hadn't proved it.
So did Grubauer, right? When Grubauer went to Colorado, right? He signed a 3-year, $10 million deal coming from.
He didn't really prove he was a number one in Washington.
He lost it while he was, and then the funny part about that deal is, remember, he outplayed Holtby until you hit the playoffs, right? Right. And then he had a bad initial game, and Holtby took over and carried them to the Cup.
Right. Just touch on a couple things in the chat. Then we're going to do a little buy-sell thing that I had mentioned earlier. Rob JK in the chat said, Mike also thought Garrett Sparks had value. LOL. Okay, I thought Garrett Sparks.
That's one of the decade hot takes.
Yeah, excuse me. I thought let's talk about accurate time here. I thought Garrett Sparks had value after he won the Calder Cup, Rob, not after he was a sieve all last year. Then, of course, he had no value. So what I said is they should have traded him last summer before, or in the summer of 2018 before, he was the backup, because I knew he wasn't going to be a good backup in the NHL. He's not a good goaltender, but not everybody knew that.
But you know what the other issue is? We all say, hey, if he's a good goalie, it's easy to trade him and get value. And you know what? It's hard to trade a goalie now. Yeah, that's the reality.
And Thomas Smith, I didn't see this minor trade yesterday. It just struck me because
if it's minor, Thomas knows about it.
Yeah, that's Thomas Boyle.
That's true. Yes,
Thomas Smith was Patrick Seeloff traded for Chris Mueller. Chris Mueller, I know because he played for the Marlies in their Calder Cup winning team. He's from the Buffalo area. He was with the Marlies. He was there for a couple of years, had some real success with them. He's a minor league guy. He signed with Syracuse, I think probably because he wanted to stay relatively close to his family. Now he gets traded to the San Diego Gulls. And I think it was a 2-year deal. I'm not 100% sure, but that's the thing that sucks. You can't get no move protection when it's a minor.
Well, and you know what? While the weather's great, it's a high cost of living for an AHL player.
Right, exactly. So, all right.
And as far as Seeloff, I liked him 6 years ago, if that matters.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know whether it's just an organizational depth thing, because maybe they're going to call up Cal Foote and they don't, or I'm not sure what they're doing. I know the Tampa Bay's defense, if you look at it right now, is where I think that if they were going to make any trades before the deadline, is where they would go to add somebody, because I just don't think their defense is that strong. Now, okay, and we'll end right at 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock your time, Russ. Okay. Every team is at 37 to 40 games, so we can call it the halfway mark of the season. I'm probably going to do a report card on the halfway point later in the week. But you can sort of take stock right now, what team, where teams are right now, and whether you would say buy on the chances of them making the playoffs, or sell in the sense that you don't think they're going to make the playoffs. And obviously the Bruins are going to make the playoffs at 57 points. Washington at 59. Pittsburgh is at 52, and the Islanders at 51. I don't think any of them are in doubt right now, but stranger things have happened. All right, Rob, we'll just go through these quickly, East and West. Toronto is at 21-14-5, 47 points. They played 40 games. The other teams in the division have played a few games less, but they pretty much used up most of their games in hand. Russ, would you buy on Toronto to make the playoffs, or are you still skeptical?
No, I'm skeptical. It's a long road. They now have to, play 750 hockey, something like that. And with all the ties that could happen and loser points and everything else, it becomes a mathematical equation when you're at the half season mark. It does.
Jan?
If they're able to acquire a blue liner early, like they did with Muzzin, to try to make that run, then I think they have a good shot. If not, I agree with Russ. I think it's going to be very difficult. I mean, I think you got to look at Boston, you got to look at Tampa, and I think we all still think Florida's got another run in them, which they're starting to put it together a little bit. And if Barkov and especially Huberdeau keeps playing like he's playing, that's got, and their blue line has been better than expected with guys like Yandel and Ekblad, and even Matheson. I think Toronto's going to have a very tough time given how tight the East is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going full sell on this one, but I'm a little scared in terms of the Muzzin injury, the Janssen injury, the injuries that piled up. They lost Marner for a time, they lost Tavares for a time. They're overplaying Anderson. Anderson, I think, in the last couple games has looked a little sluggish, and that's a big thing. Now they're 12-4-1 under Sheldon Keefe. They've been a dramatically different. The team is playing much, much better than they did under Mike Babcock. And their schedule is easier. They have, I think, the 6th easiest schedule in terms of winning percentage of the teams that they play against. But the injuries can pile up, and they continue to play loosey-goosey hockey, and that is not, that may work in the regular season, at least in the first half. But we saw over the last couple of years, in the second half, the hockey gets tighter and it gets tougher to win, and that's why I think they're going to have to be a better two-way team, and maybe need to add somebody before the deadline to solidify their chances. All right, Florida, I think we all think that they're a playoff team. Tampa Bay in Buffalo tonight to play the Sabres. 37 games. They're 20-13-4. The thing and they came back and they beat Montreal, but in the first period they were outshot 17-0 and were trailing 2-0 to the Habs before they came back and won. I think it was 6-5. I'm still a little skeptical. I can't believe that I'm a marginal buy on the Lightning, but I just can't believe that they're still where they are this deep into the season. Russ?
No, I'm skeptical. I think they're literally playing on talent alone. I think they have tuned out their coach. I think these are all the classic signs that the coach is not getting through to them by the things that you're saying. Stamkos stepped up the other day and had a good speech, and they won after that. And then you just said, was that 2 games later, they slip back into getting outshot like that. I think they're trying to do it on talent alone. I don't have any faith that Julien Gauthier can make the right trade either. He hasn't done much for them.
Brisebois. Yeah,
Brisebois. Sorry, Julien Gauthier is a player.
Right.
Julien Brisebois. He hasn't done much. Let's be honest about that.
Yeah. Jan, are you selling?
Well, I mean, look, talent-wise, they still have tremendous talent, right? It's funny. Kucherov has had a good year, but you look compared to what he posted last year, nowhere near, right? Stamkos, as I wrote in my column for RotoWire this week, you kind of forget almost that he's there, and then you look up and he's productive, right? The big key to me is that their blue line has not been good. McDonough has shown some regression and some wear and tear, which has been a big part of it. Vasilevsky clearly hasn't been good, but I think he's been left out high and dry by his defense, right? So the big key to me is that blue line, unless they get somebody who's more of a shutdown kind of a defenseman, even with all the talent there, unless that talent just plays, back to the level of where they were the first half of last season and all of them collectively, I think Tampa Bay is going to have an awfully difficult time in terms of making a playoff, making a run to make the playoffs in general. But if they can get a good, solid blue liner, then I'll kind of change my viewpoint on that. But as you said, Russ, it's on Brisebois to go out and kind of find that guy in the marketplace if they can.
All right, we'll just do quickly here some of the other teams in the East, then we'll do the West quickly and then the show. Yep. Philadelphia, 22-12-5, 49 points in the first wild card spot. But the wild card race right now, there are 7 teams within 8 points of the 2 wild card spots. Buy or sell them making the playoffs, Russ? Philly.
Right now I'm going to sell. I still think there is a way for them to make it, but they have to get better defense as well. They have to get more secondary scoring. They have to make a trade as well. So I'm really back and forth, but if I have to choose one, then I'll say I'm going to sell.
I'll say sell.
I'm going to say buy. My viewpoint is based on depending on what you get out of Van Riemsdyk, right? If it's Van Riemsdyk that you got for that couple of week stretch where he finally got hot and woke up, he can kind of carry the offense and provide the secondary scoring, especially now with Konechny back, given that he's over their injury and we've seen what Giroux can do. But I agree. To me, it's their blue line, right? You've gotten great play out of Provorov. Hardest has been better, not great, but you still don't know what you're going to get at Gostisbehere every night. And to me, if they can get better play from the blue line, that to me is what's, we've said this before, right? Tampa, Toronto, same type thing, but especially Philly. They got to get another defenseman.
Here's what's worrisome. You know what's worrisome about them? They are missing Scott Lawton. With all this talent on this team, Scott Lawton has been sorely missed, and that's a worry. That to me that falls on the veterans.
Right, but that you're missing a guy that fills a kind of a role, right? So
no, but I'm telling you, go look at the record with Scott Lawton. It's so much better because they have no defensive forwards. Kevin Hayes has finally gotten hot, so he's got 12 goals. But this is like right now, they're teetering, man.
Carolina, 23-14-2, 48 points, plus 22 goal differential, holding on to the last wild card spot. I'm buying. The only thing I think is the hindrance for them is I don't believe in their goaltending. I think Mrazek and Reimer is one of the worst tandems in the league, and they're being propped up by a good defense.
I can't disagree. I can't agree with you more. I mean, Mrazek and both Reimer have been although Reimer was good for a while, and he kind of hit the skids lately. But you look at that blue line, especially the growth that we've seen out of Dougie Hamilton this year, which I think to all of us is a bit unexpected given his career track to date.
I'm going to say not to me, but go ahead. Keep going.
Martin Necas can continue to grow, as we've seen so far, he takes a ton of the pressure off Aho and Teravainen and guys like that. And don't forget, the specter of Justin Williams coming back for a playoff run is there, which can't be discounted because of the fact that he provides a veteran presence and a guy that steps up big in big games. So if he's in any kind of shape and you get him cheap and you kind of insert him into the lineup, even on the third line, that makes that team better, especially with Dzingel starting to play a bit better as well.
I'm buying, but there's a couple things. So I do think they got enough points out of Reimer early to sort of help the season when he does hit the skids for longer periods like he's now.
They banked them. They banked the points, yeah.
Yeah, they banked the points. Brendan Moore has done a great job. There's no question about that. I think Justin Williams would have been back already had he had a halfway decent offer. Like, I think they're really trying to get Justin Williams ridiculously cheap here.
They said, let's
see where they are cap wise, right, in terms of trade deadline. Then you'll have a better sense as to what can be offered.
No, he's not coming back for $700,000.
No, he'll go somewhere else.
Yeah, he probably will. Okay, Rangers 19-15-4, 42 points. I think they're going to sell, so I'm selling.
I'm selling. The blue line's not good enough. I may have been wrong about that.
I'm hedging. And again, I'll say this because of this, and Brooks wrote it today. I was going to cover it also, right? I know there's been a lot of talk, and Eck posted about the Bruins, right? And I don't know what prospect Boston's given up at the number one, because honestly, I don't particularly love their system and don't see anybody that's a fit.
What?
What?
Boston has a great system, Jam. Seriously.
I don't love all the guys there, though. But they're not going to give you one of the top guys.
They have enough guys that you don't do get a top guy.
Yeah.
Huh?
They have enough guys that you don't have to.
So if you're the Rangers, a 1 + who gets you Kreider?
Beecher.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think they're moving Beecher, though, in that deal.
Oh, I think they might.
No.
I think you could get either Beecher or
Senyshyn?
No, better than Frederick. I think you go for him or Frederick.
We talked about maybe. So, but you look at the chemistry. Look, I mean, they have a lot of decisions to make, right? So, but you look at the chemistry that Strome and Panarin have and Zib and Kreider have. That's two top six, depending on your wingers. That's pretty tough to beat. But I agree with you. The blue line has been very sketchy at best.
Yeah.
Especially, Trouba hasn't been as good as expected. Shea has definitely been very up and down, better than he was last year, but nowhere near where he was his rookie and second year in the league. So I'm hedging because I do think the talk to me in about a week, and I hate to say this, after the West Coast Canada swing, and I think you'll have a better sense as to what direction the Rangers are going. And if they get swept, then they're clearly selling. If they win and go, let's say 3-0-1 or 3-1, I think the viewpoint could change, as crazy as that sounds.
And remember, Sweeney last year, he traded for Coyle. He traded for Marcus Johansson before the deadline.
Yeah, he'll be aggressive. Boston will be aggressive.
This could be the last crack with Chara, with Krejci. I think they'll
No,
go.
they're gonna do stuff, and I think even if Kreider went to Boston, he still might come back to the Rangers.
I agree.
The Rangers have no semblance of order on defense, and it doesn't matter how you shuffle the deck chairs. It's just not going to get it done. And I'm not sure it's all on the players. I think it's part of the structure and the management. And they, for as long as those coaches are still there, you're going to get this same lousy defense.
Is this a Quinn issue, a Ruff issue, or both?
No, it's a Ruff issue. It's been 2 years for a Ruff.
Okay. We'll do the Western Conference next show, but I'm going to finish out the East. Montreal 18-15-6, 42 points. Sell.
Well, you never were going to buy on them anyhow. I'm going to sell also.
I don't think we've seen enough at a price to think they should be a buyer. I think he's been way too inconsistent. But the one thing I said, if guys like if Weber continues playing like he's playing, he's been very good. And you get out of Tatar, what you've seen out of him, and don't forget Druin's still coming back. So if Druin comes back and he lengthens the lineup, that could change the mindset.
Update here on something we just talked about. Jake Gensel out 4 to 6 months.
Oh, 4 to 6 months.
Wow.
So he had shoulder.
That's got to be a dislocated or collarbone or something.
That was really serious. Wow.
It was probably dislocated, Jan, because he was holding his shoulder down. I think it was. Okay, we'll just finish this out.
I thought they would have reported it much earlier if it was that serious, like that much of a no-brainer. Like they really waited.
They waited until after the surgery. He had surgery this morning.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They waited until after the surgery. That's the only reason I felt like it wasn't going to be as serious as that, because most teams don't wait until after the surgery to give a player uptate.
Yeah,
that's definitely got to be a dislocated collarbone.
No, but you know what I mean? Normally they say, hey, he's going into surgery, but they waited till after. So yeah, he's done for. You're not going to see him anymore this year.
No, and if Crosby comes back in the next week, then they're in.
Yeah, but again, look.
What Crosby?
I'm not equating Crosby and Gensel, but Gensel has been so good all season for them, right? That getting Crosby back is as weird as this will sound. It's kind of almost at best a like for like exchange, which means you're still down. Now,
I would.
Gensel has been amazingly good, right? I did say it's not exactly, but given how good Gensel has been in terms of being a scorer for them and how he balanced out that lineup. The team went 13-5-3 so far without Crosby since he's been sidelined. Granted, Crosby's awesome. I'm not saying that, but Gensel's been a sniper.
Crosby will make players better. I don't think.
I agree with you, but now the question becomes: do they now start making phone calls to add a winger in the short?
Well, they will.
Russ, here comes Ilya Kovalchuk.
No, I don't think
so. Crosby will be at the one blue line, and Kovalchuk will be back at the other one, or to be at the red line.
All right, Columbus at 17-4-8, 42 points. I would sell now based on Korpisalo.
Oh, yeah, that's a big sell.
And Buffalo at 17-16-7, 41 points. They have, I think, lost 5 of their last 6 and lost Jeff Skinner for 3 to 4 weeks with an upper body injury. I never thought they were making the playoffs.
They're toast. They're toast.
So I think they're complete toast. And I think, everybody around Buffalo right now is crying for Jason Botterill to make a trade. But I think they're basing that on them getting back in the playoff race. If he's smart, he makes trades to make them better going forward. Not saying draft picks, but get young players for guys like Scandella, for Bogosian, for the guys who are not going to be here.
And you have Skinner out the next 3 weeks also, which hurts their offense. So,
right.
Well, you could argue it should hurt their offense, but he hasn't been particularly good this year.
Well, he hasn't been playing on the first line. But okay. All right, great show, guys. We'll be back on Friday with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Jan Levine, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just